And we'll look at the next slide just to see what that's about. So here's scarcity, like at its most basic. Okay. So point A is so we've got, let's just pretend we're in a society where we only need two things to live. Okay, there's only two things we need to produce. So one is butter and one is guns. I'm sure you guys have heard about butter and guns before. So at point A over here is where we focus all of our resources on producing just butter and 0 guns. Point B is where we focus all our resources on producing just guns and no butter.
Sorry, can we record the session, please? Are we allowed to?
I have a loud recording. I am recording the session myself to upload later. Okay. And then obviously point C here is where we're producing nothing. We're not using our resources to produce anything. So, and this purple line here is your production possibility curve. So this represents the most that we can produce. We can produce anywhere at any point below this, but not past it, because we don't have the resources to produce past it. And we see here that the demand is actually at E, which is past our curve. So we can't actually produce that.
Yeah. Last night.
And then this red zone here represents the scarcity, what we aren't able to produce. Okay. Anyone want to give some input there? Does anybody got a question before I move on? Okay.
Hi.
Yes.
Hello. Hi, Joel, just a quick one, man. So the difference between opportunity cost and scarcity,
yeah.
Where does it come in? Okay. So I see the gap there between D and E, which represents scarcity, but what is the opportunity cost?
See, I'm doing each of them individually, see? So here's the inefficiency. Okay. Here's choice, okay. Here's opportunity cost, and then this is all of them combined at the end.
Opportunity. Okay. All right. No, perfect. That's fine.
I'll show you when we get to it.
We'll get there. Okay.
So inefficiency is when an economy. What am I saying? Where's my English? When an economy is not using its resources to the fullest and you're producing beneath your PPC. So CE is where we could potentially be producing, but instead we're sitting at D, and this is how much we're actually producing. So all of this space is where we could possibly be, but we're just sitting behind here. So this red zone would imply inefficiency because we're not using our resources to the fullest, and which would be on somewhere on this purple line, which is your PPC. So then we have choice, and choice is what your society chooses in your economy. So choice would be, so let's say that 80% of people would rather have butter over guns. So we need to focus most of our resources, 80% of our resources, on producing butter. So we're producing 5.5 million units of butter, but if you go down, you see we can only produce 2 million units of guns because we don't have enough resources to produce 5 million of this and 5 million of this as well. So we're dedicating most of our resources in our production towards butter, which means we're producing a lot less guns, but that's fine because 80% of people would rather have butter. Okay, so that is the choice that your society makes, and that's where it puts you at point D here. And then you've got your opportunity cost, which is the price of choosing one thing over another thing. So obviously, before I go onto the graph, if you think about it, like if you're trying to think about what you want for dinner, you know, am I gonna make some curry from scratch, or am I gonna just get McDonald's, you know? So obviously, if you choose McDonald's, then you know what your opportunity cost would be the curry. Like, and let's say that would be, in theory, would be tastier because it's homemade. But if you choose the curry, then you're losing out on the McDonald's, and it take a lot more time to make that curry.
Come here.
So when you look at it in a graph, we'll see here. So let's say we choose option D. Now we're making 5.5 million units of butter, but the cost of that is 4 million guns, because now we could potentially produce 6 million here. This is the end point. The most guns that we can produce is 6 million. The most butter we can produce is 6 million. But we're sitting here at point D. So all we can, we're choosing to produce 5.5 million units of butter, and we're focusing most of our resources on butter. But then if you go down, we're only producing 2 million units of guns. So then the opportunity cost of D would be 4 million guns, because 6 minus 4 is 2, wow, 6 minus 2 is 4. So then that's the cost that we're missing out on. And obviously vice versa. So if we decide we're going to produce 5.5 million guns, then the opportunity cost would be 4 million units of butter that we could potentially be producing. 2 million. Does that help you, to the guy who asked for the difference between them?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can't
Okay.
always see names, so I have to say the girl or the guy.
That's fine.
Sorry, Joel.
Yeah?
Sorry, and forgive me, guys. It may be, yeah, I know we've spoken about silly questions, but when we are required to do graphs and draw graphs, okay, are we always given a story and then we need to obviously illustrate that in a graph?
Sometimes you are given a story. I would say like 8 out of 10 times you're given a story. But sometimes they just straight up tell you, like later on you'll see, usually with the PPF frontier, they'll give you a story. And usually with supply and demand, but there is one case in which I went through so many past papers, and there was only one case where I saw that they didn't give a story. They just said illustrate what happens if the price equilibrium stays the same and this changes. But there was no
Okay, I think
object,
I
there
saw
was
that
no
as well.
story behind it.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
But
So
usually
your information or your material, yeah, your material or your information that you need to do the graph or the diagrams, they generally do give you most times. Okay, thank you.
okay, so that's everything individually. So that's opportunity, that's your choice, that's your inefficiency, and that's your scarcity. Now they might say to you, pretend that you're selling meat and potatoes, or let's stick with the story we have here. Pretend that you're selling butter and guns, and draw a PPF representing opportunity costs, choice, scarcity, and inefficiency. And then you have to combine them all into one graph together. So it does look a bit confusing, but if you know how to do all of them, just take it step by step, and you do it one at a time on one graph, and you make sure there's space for everything, then you'll be okay. And also if you use keys here, like you have given keys. So we've got inefficiency, which is orange, and it's represented by D. So we can see here, there's our inefficiency. And then we've got our scarcity represented by E. And then it's gray, so we've got our gray zone here. Then we've got your F and G, which is opportunity costs. So we've got our two different opportunity costs in pink. Over here, there's F and then there's the G. And then we've got choice, which is what the community has chosen. And then that's all of it on one graph put together. And then obviously you've got your PPC of what is possible to be produced. So when you know, if you learn everything individually, then it'll be easy to put it into one graph like this. But there's also, so as we know it here on this graph, this purple line here represents everything that, like the maximum level of what we're able to produce. We cannot produce more than this. We cannot go further than this. But there is something that we can do to push our line out further. So maybe if we change something about the way we're operating, we can push this line out further to go past E, and then E won't be unattainable anymore. So if we just scroll down to techniques, because techniques is what changes the PPF, what makes it stretch out further. So when it comes to the PPC, we see that achieving beyond the point is not possible. You cannot achieve beyond the curve because it's just not possible to do with the resources that you have. But there is a factor that can allow your PPC to move forward and become better. This allows you more capital and more production, or it can cause it to even move inwards and become worse, which means you produce less and there's a loss of capital, which would be inefficiency. But this factor is techniques. So once again, we're going to look at this in pieces and then look at it in the end again. So here we've got capital. So we've got consumer goods on one side and capital goods on one side. So if the quantity of the available resources increases or the techniques improve to further the movement, then it will be attainable. Then we can move out. So B goes to C, X goes to Y. And this shows this space here, and this expansion is economic growth. And in this case, we're going to assume that the available factors of production and technology and all of that stays the same. So then A would stay in place. And if all the resources were used to their maximum capability, then B moves out to C. Here you can see I've written in black. An improved technique implies less resources are used to produce the same level of output. So we're making our resources stretch further, or we're using the same stuff that we have, but in a different way to make it go further and to make more money off of it. So this is consumer goods. So a new technique for producing consumer goods and then when they combine and it doesn't stay put on one point and they move out, then that is overall economic growth. Because now there's an improved technique for our goods.
Jill, we
Sorry, Jill, I
can't hear
can't
you
hear
anymore.
anything.
Okay, like 5 people spoke at once.
Hello?
Yeah, also
Hello?
lost, yeah.
Hi, Jill, your volume went down.
Carl,
Yes, babe?
I can hear you, but I can't hear Joel.
I can't hear Joel either.
I can't hear anything either.
But it's not us, because I can hear you.
Hi, Joel.
That was showing consumer goods and capital goods. The before this one, the graph before this one, please.
It needs to go back to the consumer one, because I think that's where the sound disappeared. Is it still the same? Can you guys hear?
I can't hear nothing.
Still can't hear
No,
anything.
I can't, also can't hear
Actually, I'm
anything,
trying to
guys.
phone her.
You can next.
Yeah, here we go.
Now I can hear
Are
you.
you back?
Okay.
Thanks.
Can you go back to consumer, Joel? I think that's
We
where
can
your
hear
audio
you
actually.
now. We can. Consumer job.
Thank you.
No, it's fine. I just thought to get your attention, but be back on. Thanks, Joe. Let's keep it moving. No, I just wanted to point out about the sound, but be back on. It's fine. Let's keep on moving. Oh. Hi, Joe.
Sorry, Jill. Can I ask a question? So is it? Sorry, Jill. Hi, Jill. Hi. Can I wanted to ask, as a person, is it why? Okay. Is it wise for a person to do the graphs aside, ne, and save them, like copy and paste them aside and save them, and say those are for PPF, ne, so that if they ask a question, then you just copy and paste it. Is it wise? Huh? Yes. Mm. Okay. Okay. So you can just do the graphs aside for PPF, graphs for PPC aside, make a file. Then when it comes to a question, then just copy and paste and write whatever is needed to be written. Okay.
Can we just agree that the PPC and the PPF is the same thing? Okay, thanks. Mm, mm. Thank you.
Yes, we do.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. Thank you.
All good. Thank you.
Comfortable.
Can I
Thank
can I give you a tip? If you click on the same link, you can always go into the same meeting. It'll work for another 45 minutes. Just click on the same link and you can use it and it'll work again.